Before you assume this is just another oil headline, stop for a moment and really listen, because what Saudi Arabia just did quietly closed a chapter that shaped the global economy for half a century. There was no dramatic press conference, no emergency summit, no official announcement saying the deal is over, but make no mistake, the 50-year oil arrangement between Saudi Arabia and the United States has effectively ended, and the consequences will unfold slowly, subtly, and far beyond energy markets. To understand why this matters, you have to go back to the foundation of the modern financial system. In the 1970s, after the collapse of the gold standard, the US struck a strategic understanding with Saudi Arabia. Saudi oil would be sold in US dollars, and in return, the US would provide security, military support, and political backing. That simple arrangement did something extraordinary. It forced the world to hold dollars. If you wanted oil, you needed dollars. And because oil powered everything, the dollar became the center of global finance. This wasn't written into law. It was enforced by habit, trust, and power. For decades, it worked perfectly. The US gained monetary dominance. Saudi Arabia gained security and influence. The system looked permanent, but permanent systems only last as long as they continue to serve both sides equally. Over time, that balance shifted. Saudi Arabia's world changed, its population grew, its economy needed diversification, its leadership wanted autonomy, not dependency. And globally, the energy map began to shift. China became Saudi Arabia's largest oil customer. Asia replaced the West as the center of demand. At the same time, the US became less dependent on Middle Eastern oil thanks to shale. Quietly, the logic of the old deal weakened. Now add geopolitics. Sanctions, frozen assets, weaponized finance, and unpredictable policy shifts sent a clear signal to countries holding dollar-based systems. Dependence has a cost. Saudi Arabia watched reserves get frozen elsewhere. It watched alliances shift overnight, and it asked a dangerous question. What happens if our entire economic model depends on a system we don't control? That question changed everything. Instead of breaking the deal loudly, Saudi Arabia let it expire in practice. It opened the door to selling oil in other currencies. It deepened ties with China. It explored yuan settlements. It joined alternative financial blocs. None of this was framed as anti-American. It was framed as optionality. And optionality is power. Let me ask you something right here, because this is where the story really turns. If oil, the most important commodity in the world, no longer has to be priced exclusively in dollars, what happens to the system built on that assumption? The answer isn't collapse, it's erosion. The petrodollar didn't die overnight, but it lost exclusivity. And exclusivity was the source of its strength. From the US perspective, this doesn't trigger immediate disaster. The dollar still dominates. Markets are deep. Trust remains high. But the long-term direction has shifted. Once the biggest oil exporter in the world signals that alternatives are acceptable, others feel safer exploring them. Not to rebel, but to hedge. And hedging is how systems change without conflict. This matters far beyond oil. Dollar demand, treasury markets, global liquidity, all of it rests on the assumption that the dollar is unavoidable. When avoidance becomes possible, even in limited cases, leverage weakens. And here's the human side most people don't connect. When financial dominance fades, the cost of maintaining stability rises. Debt becomes harder to fund cheaply. Inflation becomes harder to control. Global influence requires more effort. Ordinary people don't feel this immediately, but over time it shows up in prices, interest rates, and uncertainty. History tells us that global systems don't collapse when they're challenged. They evolve when incentives change. Saudi Arabia didn't end a deal to make a statement. It adjusted to a new world where power is multipolar, money is being restructured, and dependence is a liability. The real question now isn't whether the US and Saudi Arabia will remain partners. They will. The real question is whether the era of unquestioned dollar dominance tied to oil has quietly passed its peak. If this video made you see oil, money, and power as part of the same system, then this channel is exactly where you should be. Subscribe, because we break down the silent shifts that reshape the world long before they become obvious. And trust me, when the foundations move, everything above them eventually feels it.